Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Movie Film Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about movies. Movie Film Podcast on the radio.
Welcome to Movie Film. It's episode 304, brought to you by Mr. Boy Productions. I'm Zachy Hassan. I'm here with Brian Hall.
Hey, how's it going, Zachy?
Brian, a week ago exactly, you and I were sitting in the audience for a taping of the NBC sitcom Night Court.
I know. I can't believe that was actually exactly a week ago at this moment as we're recording.
So as we record this.
Yeah, I mean, a week ago you were out here visiting me in Los Angeles, and I was trying to find something fun for us to do, and I'm on this mailing list that will send you opportunities to be in the audience for, late night talk shows or sitcoms or whatever. And I was curious if you had ever done that, been in the audience of a sitcom. And not only had you not done that, but there was an opportunity for a sitcom you actually watch.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we did. So, I mean, what is your takeaway from that? I mean, did you enjoy the experience?
I did enjoy the experience, although my ass was so numb after 4 hours spent sitting on possibly the most uncomfortable chairs I have ever sat on.
Yeah, they weren't, there's like those really like high-end folding chairs with the cushion and whatever. I don't know how to describe these. These felt like,
these were not those.
Like at church or something, like an extra chair you would pull up or something. That'd
really
be
was like that.
Are those from the 70s? Yeah, but so I mean, what was it like then though to watch like a show that you're familiar with, see the sets? I mean, it was a long time. I mean, did you enjoy the experience, or was it like get me out of here?
Oh well, a little bit of both. Certainly, by the end, I was like, I'm going to lose feeling below the buttocks.
Yeah,
which was concerning. But no, it was a great experience that I'm glad I have done it. I don't feel the need to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Because, this is like one of those check the box. I talk about sitcom production in my classes all the time. So this, I can actually speak firsthand. This is how it's done. And it's so cool to see the sets. I didn't have an idea in my head of how they're all the sets are sort of right next to each other on one stage, and they just kind of move from one thing to the next. I love, Melissa Roche and John Larroquette, Wendy Malick. These are all performers who I know. And, it's just fun to see the specific style of making a multi-camera sitcom, which is so distinct. And, it's not like single camera shows.
Right.
And, it's deemed maybe old fashioned a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, the style is maybe a little broad, even like the performances, even, the types of jokes, but I don't know. Seeing it in person, you do realize, I mean, it's like when you're watching a movie versus going to the theater, the people on a stage are speaking in a different sort of way because of the environment. And it feels sort of related to this a little bit. They're speaking a little bigger because you're invoking an audience reaction.
It is like watching a play. And so you appreciate the role that the audience has in that, which I think is the most interesting part. There's the warm-up guy in the audience who, God bless this guy, I'll tell you.
I mean, he is your experience.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you spend the most amount of time with that person.
Yeah, he's up there telling jokes, telling anecdotes he's experienced, and talking to people in the audience, just doing anything to keep the audience's energy up. Because when you're watching the same, like with us, they shot the cold open, must have been like 6-7 times.
Yeah, and it wasn't like they shot it and then someone came in, whispered in someone's ear, they ran away, and then they did it again with a tweak. I mean, it was like a pause, right? There was like a little meeting of the minds, and then we'll talk about this, and I mean, you could see the actors just kind of going off and talking on their own. It was taking a while between this, and like you said, I think it happened about 6 times.
Yeah. So with that, so in other words, you have a situation where potentially the 6th or 7th version is the funniest because they've tweaked it, but that's the one where the audience is like, because you've sat through
you've
this,
heard it,
and so that's where the warm up guy, Ron was his name. He's there trying to just get adrenalize the joint, you know?
Yeah, he was great. I mean, he juggled, and then
Yeah.
and then he gave out prizes, and you got one.
I got a T-shirt. Yeah, apparently my laugh was noticeable enough that it was singled out, which makes me both proud and self-conscious at the same time.
Did you find it hard to laugh for like 5.5 hours?
Well, yeah, not as much as you think, because it was funny, I mean, I tried to just be. My approach was like, I wasn't treating it like, oh, I've seen this before, we've done this already. I'm like, each take, I just want to appreciate what the performers do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and this episode in particular guest starred Richard Kind.
Yes, yeah.
So as soon as he walks out, there's Bing Bong. Right. And he's got a specific energy, and he, in every take, the actors would do something slightly different. And I was appreciative of that. So in answer to your question, it was not hard to laugh because I think these are funny performers who were given good material to work with.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like it's a little difficult at the beginning because it's unnatural. I mean, you're laughing to an unnatural degree. And with a volume that is unnatural. Even if I was watching a movie that I loved and I was laughing, I wouldn't laugh in the way that they want you to laugh there. And so then I find that I go to like a state or something, right? Like I'm just like, oh yeah, everything's funny. I'm in a good mood. Everything becomes a little heightened or something, or I have a perma smile on my face because that's just the reality we're existing in that moment for a while. And I find then I'm not even thinking about it. I'm just laughing really hard at things that I've not even necessarily finding that funny, or I've heard, like you say, like 5 times.
But it was a good experience. I got to come back because literally in my classes, we are talking about sitcoms at this moment.
Oh, that's so perfect.
So I got to come back and be like, so I attended a taping. I was like, anybody heard of Night Court? And no one has heard of Night Court.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not surprised. I mean,
I'm not surprised by any of this stuff anymore. But it tells you very much that the audience for linear television is just withering on the vine.
Yeah, I mean, well, I was going to say I wouldn't be surprised at all if they didn't know the '80s version.
No, they don't know this version either.
Yeah, but then, to your point, I mean, what I keep hearing, and I'm sure, well, your kids are a little different. You say a lot, but it seems like most kids aren't really watching TV, right? It's like they're choosing what they watch, and it's on Netflix or whatever. So they wouldn't just come across Night Court on NBC Tuesdays at 8 or whatever.
Yeah, why watch Night Court when you can watch the Menendez brothers? which everybody seems to. Boy, everybody got an opinion on that all of a sudden.
It's so funny. That was one of those cases I do remember, but not as well as OJ or something. But It was weird that I was hearing about people dressing up as the Menendez brothers for Halloween, and they're not even people our age. They're like young people. You're like, what? Like I'm in the Twilight Zone or something. It's weird.
I'm like, what's next? Let's do Amy Fisher next. What else we got lined up in the bill?
Shocked that hasn't happened yet.
Right?
Yeah. It has to be coming.
It's in the pipeline. I'm certain of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that story is salacious, and with a name like Buttafuoco, like,
I didn't know what a Lolita was. Like I know the significance of the book Lolita only became apparent to me after having heard of the Long Island Lolita.
That is so funny. Now that you say it, I realize. Yeah. No, I didn't know what that was. Yeah. That was just like one of those little shorthands you'd see on hard copy or a after school.
Today on hard copy.
Yeah.
The Long Island Lolita.
Do you remember Current Affair? It would be like,
yeah, I remember Current Affair.
Yeah.
There's an episode, this is total tangent, but there's an episode of News Radio which is very funny where it's all about how the Andy Dick character went on air and mispronounced Buttafuoco. And they don't say how he mispronounced it, but you can sort of intuit.
Right.
It's just like he said that on the air,
Oh man, everything you just said is such a time capsule.
Hey, really, the Andy Dick radio, Buttafuoco.
I saw something somewhere. It was like some meme about Los Angeles, and it's like everyone in Los Angeles has A, B, And like C was some weird encounter with Andy Dick. And I was like, yeah, I have 2 actually.
Did you used to watch news radio back in the day?
No.
I was a fan of that show. I used to watch it. I still think it's very funny.
Yeah.
But if you would have told me back then, the guy who plays the handyman on news radio, one day he's going to end up being a crucial component of a presidential election.
Oh, yes. Right. Yeah. Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan.
Yes. Well, I mean, for me, it's Fear Factor, where he's making people eat horse anuses and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nobody on that show was like, "You eat the horse anus."
I know. You get in that box of scorpions.
I wanted them all to gang up on him and throw him into the box of spiders. Exactly.
I know. Oh man, what a time!
I feel like civilization may have peaked during the horse rectum era of NBC primetime.
Right.
Anyway, hey, what else have you seen lately? Thank you for a lovely afternoon, by the way, at the night court taping.
Dude, that was just the best weekend. Absolutely the best. I mean, I feel like we did a number of things that were fun, but we had one, I think it was Saturday. Like we woke up, made coffee. I think we ordered in lunch, and then it was evening. And we were like, wow, we didn't do anything. It's like, but we sort of did everything. You know? Like, it was a great time catching up and just hanging out.
The sound of absolute silence in a house is something that's alien to me.
Right.
So I cherish it. You know, it's something beautiful.
Yeah. Well, so let's see. 3 movies I'll mention, one very briefly, but that I think are very much worth mentioning that I caught. I want to talk about the movie Enora.
Yeah.
Which
I've been hearing good things.
Yeah, a lot of buzz around this movie. And it's by writer-director Sean Baker, who people might remember from The Florida Project, which I liked a lot, and Red Rocket, which I actually liked a lot, even though that character is much more unsavory. But that's kind of what his thing is. He tells these stories about people in sort of cities or statuses that we don't normally focus on, and it's about them just trying to like spirit and gum their way through life, you know. But they're a little gritty, you know, these stories, even though they're like weirdly optimistic, but also kind of gritty, and you know, people don't always have their motivations in the right place, but they're so motivated. Anyway, so this one I had heard was one of his, and I should say all of them are very, very graphic. You know, they're very like, and so this one I had heard, Enora, was sort of his version of Cinderella or something like that.
Okay.
Or his most audience accessible film yet. So I was expecting sort of like an R-rated Cinderella kind of story. And I was like, no. When I watched it, I was like, not really. But okay. But so the only reason I say that is because if people then are like, oh, well, that sounds like delightful. That's not exactly what you're walking into.
Let's get the kids together.
Yes. We'll go. Yeah, no. This is a very, very R-rated movie. And it's about this sex worker named Annie, played by Mikey Madison, who, you know, she had a very memorable role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and in one of the Screams, not the last one, but the one before, I think. And so she's the lead in this. She's fantastic, and it's interesting. I'll try to just basically go with what the trailer shows, because I was a little surprised by where this story went. But basically, she plays this sex worker at the strip club, and there's a client who wants someone who speaks Russian because he's the son of this like Russian oligarch type figure. And he's really young and kind of immature, but kind of charming. And he really takes to her, and it becomes this almost like Pretty Woman story where he's like, well, what if I paid you to spend the week with me? And she goes over there to his place, and basically she's shown luxury like she's never known. And then at one point he's like, let's get married. And she's like, yeah, you know, and again, in Pretty Woman, I think the point of that movie is basically that they really do, these unlikely people from different stations in life find, you know, their soulmate, and they love each other and whatever. And this one, you're never quite sure, you know, like they're certainly infatuated with one another, but what are they infatuated with? And which is what makes the movie so great, because then basically his family finds out about this and wants to break the marriage up, and that's all I'll say without going into spoilers about it. But it didn't head in a direction I expected, and I found this movie way funnier than I thought it was going to be. I laughed a lot. And
Really? Okay.
yeah, and there's all these side characters who are basically like henchmen's, kind of a catch-all word for it, but people who work for the kid's father, who it's their job to sort of break this thing apart, and they are such great characters. Like, they are really funny, they're really interesting. You think they're going to be brutish and violent, but they're not. They're just dudes who are trying to get their job done. And these kids are making it really difficult on them, and you start feeling bad for them at one point, because it's like they're not bad. Well, I don't know. Who knows what they're hoping to carry out? But in this instance, I was surprised that they weren't the character types I expected them to be, which is what, and you can say that about every single character in this movie, right up to the very last minute of this movie. It just goes in directions you don't expect. It's funny, it's whimsical, it's very, very graphic, as I said. And then by the end, it becomes, it's pretty heart-wrenching. And I really enjoyed this movie. So for people that, are up for a movie of this nature, that features the things that it features, but are up for a story like this, I highly recommend Anora. It's a really, really, I don't know. I would say like a surprise. Like, it wasn't the movie I walked in expecting, and I really walked away loving it. I saw it with a group of people, and we all were like, well, that's not what I thought at all, but we all loved it. So I'm certain, Mikey Madison will probably be up for some sort of acting awards at the end of the year for this. Yeah, I really look forward to hearing what you think about this.
Yeah, I'm planning on seeing it. It's just a matter of finding the time in my schedule. But I've been hearing nothing but good things about it.
Yeah. Another movie I saw that I did not expect to see, but a friend asked me to go, is The Substance. And this is a movie.
It's a horror movie.
Yeah, I'd call it a body horror movie versus a straight horror movie. It's sort of a satire. It's in like a heightened reality, so things aren't quite down to earth. Basically, the plot is Demi Moore plays someone who is famous and known for being, very attractive, and everyone was attracted to her in the 80s and 90s or whatever. But she's getting older, and her boss is like, "You're not it anymore. We need a new it." Right. And so she goes, basically she comes across this drug she can take called The Substance, and it will create out of her. It's not a younger version of her, but it's a younger person. It's kind of hard to explain. And it's Margaret Qualley, who is, in her 20s, and everybody loves her, and she's really attractive, or everyone's attracted to her. They're both attractive. Everyone's very, drawn to her. Actually, that's kind of one of the things too, where I was like, I know how Demi Moore probably feels, and certainly the way people are treating her, but she's still so beautiful in this movie.
Right. She's still Demi effing Moore. So
yeah, but she, to her credit, she's like fully naked in this movie for a lot of it. And it's like, it's one of those funny things to say, but like, it's bold. It's brave of her to go up there and be like, hey, like, this is my 60-year-old body, and here it is. And that's just part of the story actually comments on this. And, that's what she's putting up there, and like what that experience would feel like, having people not feel the ways that they used to about you. Right. So she feels compelled then to literally have this other being come out of her body. And there are these weird rules where they cannot exist at the same time, right? So Demi Moore's character gets to exist for be awake for 7 days. Then the other character gets to exist for 7 days. And they come to sort of resent that about one another. She becomes jealous of the younger version. The younger version is just like, I'm going to make more use out of this time than the older version will. So I don't want to follow the 7-day rules. And if they don't follow the 7-day rules, there are consequences. And to Zachy's point about it being a horror movie, this movie gets gross. Like really, really, really gross. But it's hard to explain, because I don't like horror movies. I don't, and what I realized was, even though I didn't like looking at everything that's in this movie, it's kind of a fable, like the gross things that are happening is someone inflicting it upon themselves. I think I don't like watching people being dismembered and torn apart against their will, screaming in horror. I just find that disturbing.
Mhm.
This is more like sad, and you're like, oh, please stop, kind of a thing. And basically, immediately I walked out thinking, this is like, what if Stanley Kubrick and Sarah Sherman from SNL, who has like gross out humor, made Death Becomes Her? That's what this is. Yeah. And I mean that as a huge compliment to the director, Coralie Farget. Fargiat. I feel terrible if she's listening, but you did a wonderful job. It's really interesting. I think it suffers from being 2 hours and 20 minutes. There's no reason for this movie to be 2 hours and 20 minutes. What's interesting is when it starts, it definitely, when I'm speaking of like Stanley Kubrick and you watch 2001 and he's just lovingly doing close-ups of all the details that he's created in this, future, and the buttons and what they look like. And, if someone is going to like have to shut something down, we're going to watch them flip a specific type of glass lid and then hit button 1 and button 2 and button 3. And there's something mesmerizing about it. And this movie definitely plays into that kind of like almost fetishizing, like insert shots and close-ups and textures and things. And at first I was like, I was just gobbling it up. I really loved it. But it's a very simple story. You know what I mean? I mean, you can kind of probably intuit from what I said. Does it seem like a good idea to do this to yourself? Probably not. And so things go south. But I think this could have been like a perfect kind of cult movie if it had been closer to like 1 hour 45 or whatever. But yeah, it's a hard movie to recommend. I mean, really, if you don't have a stomach for this kind of thing, I definitely don't recommend it. But the performances are amazing. Demi Moore's amazing. Margaret Qualley is really, really good. And I really felt the journey. I mean, that's the highest compliment I can pay it. I understood why this character would be compelled to do this. I understood why she would take things further than you're in the audience like, just stop.
Right.
But you understand why the characters do what they do, and it's hard to watch, and then it leads to disastrous results. And it's like a more intense, like I say, sort of Death Becomes Her kind of situation.
That all sounds interesting. I think the gross out stuff means I'll probably take a pass on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, what it reminded me of, honestly, is it goes into more and more and more. But at one point, she looked kind of like the Angelica Houston character from The Witches.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah, but then keep rolling with that, and just taking it further and further, and it just, yeah, and then it all comes to a head in a way, where you're just like, oh, I don't know if I can. I'm cringing so hard for these characters to get through the situation, and I don't know that they're going to be able to. It's one of those films, Okay. I don't know. I feel like everything I said is very abstract, but it's yeah, I'd say look into it if you feel like, again, if you feel like you have the stomach for it. I recommend it. I think it was really well done. It's certainly a vision, and I think the vision is executed really, really well. But it's definitely not going to be for everybody.
Okay.
So, and then lastly, I won't say much about it because you haven't seen it, but I did want to recommend a documentary called Music by John Williams.
Never heard of him.
Yes. Well, actually, it's funny because, we cover entertainment here, and he's been pretty involved in entertainment for several decades at this point.
Williams, you say?
Yeah, Williams. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, he scores films. But
anything I'd have seen?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's just, inescapable stuff.
Okay.
But
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. The only problem, though, is that instead of just making general, 4-minute droning sorts of tone poems that people slap in randomly throughout their movies and call it a score, he actually like creates themes.
Themes?
Yeah. It's kind of annoying.
What is this?
Yeah, leitmotifs, and just really generates emotion.
All right. Whatever you say, college boy.
I mean, come on.
And scene.
Yeah, and scene. He's our guy. And this is, I'll say this. It's on Disney Plus, and I was a little worried about it because I thought it would just be, you and I are so immersed in the world of John Williams.
Yeah.
Would it just feel like one of those sort of general EPK.
EPK. I was about to say, yeah, it's just another EPK. Yeah.
Yeah, we get Steven Spielberg be like, "Oh, the bikes don't fly if you don't have John Williams." Like, and it's like, yeah, I know. Like, but I want to learn about John Williams, and I would say this movie falls somewhere in the middle.
Mhm.
It's because you do have to think people aren't as read up on him as we are, right? So you do have to have something that introduces him to people and make sure they understand the impact that he's had, right? So you do have to cover that. But what I did appreciate was they do go into his past and they talk about his family and they talk about, his dad being a musician and how he became a studio musician. And that's the stuff I wanted to learn about. And you see all these old pictures of him and all the old shows that he worked on. And I would say most of the shows and themes I knew about, but there were a handful. I don't remember them now, but there was one I was like, oh shoot, I didn't know that was him. So, I mean, I think it does a good job of kind of being able to please everybody, the diehard fans and the people who are like, oh, I know that name, right? He does Star Wars, right? Like, yeah, I'd like to learn about him. I think it's good for both of those audiences.
Okay.
So, yeah, if I easy recommend. I think you'll enjoy it.
I feel like some of these docs on Disney Plus have been pretty decent with regards to that. Like there's that Harrison Ford documentary. I think it was last year.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So if it's something in that neighborhood, I'll be fine with that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly that. I mean, I think it's like the Jim Henson one too, right? Did you watch that one? I think Ron Howard.
I haven't. I want to though.
Yeah, I would say that one is very similar in that it does the thing where it has to bring people up to speed, even if you're kind of generally up to speed with the person. But it also goes back and shows you, like, I knew he had done commercials before the Muppets, and they were kind of dark humored, a little different than the Muppets, and they go into that and they show you a lot of those ads, and those are fun to see. So I'd say it falls in the same spectrum of depth.
Okay. There you go. So thumbs up for music by John Williams.
Yeah. I mean, all around. I mean, Nora, The Substance. You know what I liked about all these? Well, John Williams, it's a subject we love, and that was, it's fun to learn more about a person you're interested in. But Nora, I don't know if I've ever seen that story quite that way before, and it was executed in a way that was surprising to me through the very end. And The Substance,
it's Pretty Woman with a twist.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than that. I mean, it's there is a big turn in the middle I did not see coming, and it changes what the story is, and I liked it. I liked it a lot, actually, and I loved where it ended. I've heard some people not so sure about it, but I loved it. And then The Substance. I mean, it's a total vision. I don't know that I've seen something quite like this before. It's just, I feel like I've had nice, exciting times at the movies recently, seeing fresh things.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. But how about yourself?
In that vein, I wonder how Pretty Woman holds up. I had that thought as I was talking to you, because I have not seen that movie since the early 90s.
I saw most of it not that long ago. It's great. It's probably exactly how you remember it. It's funny. We might get into this a little bit later about one of the movies we talk about, but you realize that movie flourishes in the time that it comes out. Right. And I don't know how it would play now. And I don't just mean in terms of content, but I just mean tone. Right. It's very upbeat and cheerful and Gary Marshall, like, yeah. And I don't know. It seems like movies now have to comment on themselves a little bit more to get ahead of an audience being like, this is sure, or something. And I think that movie just allows itself to be what it is. And it's the strength of the performances with Julia Roberts and Richard Gere and their chemistry and the fun situations you find, her fish out of water. I mean, who still doesn't like cheer when she goes back into that store on Rodeo Drive, right. And is like, you work on commission, big mistake. It's still great. So, I mean, yeah, if you and the wife are looking for something to revisit, I'd say
you wouldn't have liked the Jacob's Ladder ending version where the whole movie is just a vision that Vivian has after she's shot up on heroin in a back alley and the lifelight leaves her eyes.
And it's like the guy didn't get in the car, but she imagined what if she had. Yeah,
exactly. You wouldn't have preferred that? No?
Well, by the way, I mean, did you know that's the original version, right? Not exactly that, but the original version was called 3,000.
I know it's going to be darker. It's going to be darker.
And it
right.
ends with him dropping her back off on Hollywood Boulevard and throwing $3,000 at her and driving away.
I did not know that. That is hilarious to me that you started there and you ended up with, well, Pretty Woman.
Isn't it incredible? Who had the vision
Right.
to take that script and to turn it into that? And it worked. We still know that movie all these years
That's
later.
the thing. Right. Because here's the thing. Because there's plenty of dark movies where you hear about, oh, and you know what they wanted to do? They wanted to have, they wanted like the happy ending. It was like, oh man, that would have ruined it,
Yes.
And yet, like, we live in the reality where they did that and it worked.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Weird.
Yeah. Sorry, what were you were starting?
I'm not. I'm just rambling as I am have a tendency to do.
Which I love. That's why I'm here.
Well, we have lots of letters. Speaking of why we're here, we have a basket full of letters.
Oh, dump them on the desk. Let's read them.
All right, we got a few. Ready?
Like Miracle on 34th Street. Just dump them
Exactly.
on the desk. Yeah.
People write to us like we're Santa, which is appropriate given what we're going to be talking about later.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, before we even get to the letters about the show, the regular show, we got a ton of messages from people who listened to our little Patreon extra bonus episode that we did on with regards to the election.
Yeah, that's right.
And I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for checking that out. Thanks for being on the Patreon. Thanks for being like, hey, let's hear what these two idiots have to say about something non-movie related.
Yeah.
And not laughing us out of the room.
Honestly, that was really gratifying. I mean, it was just you and I think it was before we recorded a commentary or something, and you were like, we were just starting to talk about it. And you're like, oh, let's hit record. Who knows? And we were just wasn't planned. We had no bullet points. We were just talking, and it's like 20 minutes. Threw it up there, and I was surprised and, like I said, gratified to see that it meant something to anybody, and that so many people wrote in to say that it did.
This was literally the morning after the election.
Yeah.
That we were chatting. So, I mean, we certainly had lots of stuff on our mind,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And that's really what the Patreon is for, in addition to the ad-free episodes. It's sometimes we'll do that. We'll just throw something on there.
Yeah, I love the idea of that. Just something comes to us, get it down, throw it up.
Yeah, all kinds. It doesn't have to. Some days Brian will just be waxing on about how much he loves ramen noodles, and that'll be a 47-minute episode that you just get to have.
And I do.
Yeah, he has some thoughts. You get to hear that. Ad free, mind you.
That's right.
Don't interrupt that flow.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, thank you everybody for listening to that. I really appreciate it. And of course, please support the Patreon. It's just $5 a month, and we would very much appreciate that.
Yeah.
Here's a note we got from Alex Nao. Speaking of Patreon, he wrote to us at the Patreon. He says, hey, Zach and Brian, I really enjoyed the latest episode. Hearing everyone's stories, just want to give a collective hug through the internets to all your listeners, and to you too, of course. I hope everyone's either doing well or is on the road to recovery. And this is, of course, in reference to, people have been writing in with their amazing stories that they've been sharing about memorable movie-going experiences. And I am never not in awe. This was something that started with somebody writing to us and saying, hey, what are your memorable movie-going experiences?
Yeah.
And that just sort of unlocked the floodgates, Yep.
I'd never get tired of them.
Well, with that in mind, here's a note we got from James Olson. And he says, by the time you record/post your next podcast, we will hopefully be in a calmer, peaceful, and more subdued climate than we have for the last several months. Oh, James. This is Zachy from the future. Were it so, James, in the past. Anyway, he goes on. He says, like so many of your fan base, movies were a window into an alternate world for me. They were a welcomed escape from a very tumultuous childhood. While growing up, I was startled to realize that none of my friends shared the same passion I had for film. I was constantly teased and ridiculed about watching the Star Wars trilogy, albeit the special edition, multiple times on the big screen, Well, those are obviously not your friends. Those are bad people. Stay away from them.
Yeah.
And he says, or sitting through a film's closing credits just to enjoy the composer's main themes. Or, most frustrating of all, coming out of a phenomenal movie like Star Trek First Contact and enthusiastically asking my friends what emotions and dreams that film stirred within them, only to come away with the drab response from self-proclaimed Trekkies, mind you. It was a movie, James.
Ah,
Man, that's some cold shit.
seriously, I'm like wishing I was there in those moments now.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I don't think you would have been much help after watching Star Trek First Contact if my memory of watching Star Trek First Contact with you.
I don't remember it. I'm going to be honest.
Exactly, Brian. And that is why you fail. He goes on, movies have always been a staple in my lifetime. Whenever I watch something I've already seen, I'm immediately transported back to the time in which I initially viewed it. I can recall what was going on in my life at the time, my struggles, my goals, my overall outlook, and even remember the previews that were attached to the movie and just what interesting new story was looming on the horizon. And as we plunge headfirst into an election whose conclusion is by no means certain, yes, it is. It's certain, James. And we are faced with the possibility of a return to the most ridiculous and absurd presidency of our time. It's not a possibility. It's happening. It's really happening. I would like to say how much of a haven your show has been and will continue to be, and how, despite the uncertainty of the direction of our country, it's not uncertain anymore. We know. I know that you guys will continue to be here, and that is a reassuring comfort. Well, thank you, James. Thank you guys for brightening my days, and many others. I'm sure you have established a wonderful community for all cinephiles alike. P.S. Zachy, I'm still awaiting your acceptance to the challenge of a James Bond trivia duel.
Ooh.
Hey, man, bring it.
Yeah.
I can do that.
I would just think it'd be funny if after this episode, there's a follow-up email where it's like, I thought your show would be a haven in... in these times. I was wrong.
Goodbye.
You know what's funny too? I have to bring up when he talks about sitting through, the credits to hear the themes. I'm a big credits guy. I like sitting through the credits. And my friends know this and they just get up and leave. Like, oh, we're going to the bathroom. Brian will join us later. Anyway, but in Here, Zemeckis Here, I was sitting there, but then I felt like, well, I'll get up. They usually come in to clean and whatever. But I was like, no, this is like new Silvestri. Like I want to actually. So I got up, I moved, and then I was like, no, and I went back to a different seat and I sat because I thought, no, I want to. When am I ever going to hear this music? For the first time this way, and all of the Dolby surround and whatever.
That's great.
It was wonderful. So I when you were reading that, I related to that.
Well, James, you should always know that there are very many of us.
Mm-hmm.
We are legion. We the credit music listeners.
And I don't remember if I talked about this on the show, but that is one of those things where growing up, I felt a little bit like this too. Like I wasn't feeling as much like antagonism from people, but I couldn't bond like I wanted to with people over certain things. And I realized, like, I had a moment in my 20s or whatever when I was friends with you and Sean and these other people, and I was like, oh, I found my people that I can talk about this stuff. Like we kind of gravitated toward one another, the shared interests kind of thing. And then recently I was hanging out with an old coworker, and he's several years older than me, and very different life experiences and growing up in very different times. But as we were catching up, he was just like, hey, seen any good movies lately? And then we talked about movies for like 30 minutes, and he was being really excited, talking about something he just watched. And I was like, yeah, that's, doesn't matter the age, doesn't matter the whatever. They're just those people, and it's nice when you find those people that you can talk with like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, cause I was like a soundtrack guy all my life. Right. And I was always like, well, I remember being a kid and being like, well, they make these things, so clearly people buy them. You know what I mean? Like scores. But I was always like, how come I've never met them?
Yeah.
Right. And I would say, yeah, Sean in high school was like the first time it's like, oh yeah, James Horner, I love Cherry Goldsmith or whatever. And then, yeah, with you, et cetera. And definitely it And then you realize it's a big world. It's a big world of people who like this stuff.
Yep.
We're not the weird ones.
No, we're
Troy,
out there.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Seems like a jock name, right?
Did you say Troy?
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes me the Goonies.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, James. And yes, we're going to be here. Look, I don't know what the next 4 years hold. I do know that Bobby Kennedy is in charge of HHS. So measles might be making a comeback. I don't know. Let's see how that goes. But we're going to be here. We're going to be doing our thing.
Yep. We're not going
I
anywhere.
can tell you that. Take that, Bobby Kennedy. Hey, here's a note we got from Ron DeMarco, Brian.
All right, let's hear it.
Let's hear what he had to say. Here it
We're a little punchy later in the day.
Well, okay, so let me set the scene here. On my right side, I have a milkshake that I'm chugging at. On my left side, I have a cup of coffee that I'm chugging at.
Really?
Now, I don't know what this is going to do to me 24 hours from now. I know what it's doing to me right now.
What flavor is the milkshake?
It is vanilla.
Okay.
And the coffee is also. I've got like a thermodynamic process going on in my body right now.
Yeah, that's true. I hope you don't crack in half.
Anyway, hey, here's Ron's note. He says, I wanted to shoot you a quick note about a couple of things. One in general that I've been meaning to send in for quite some time, and one thing specifically in response to Brian. Man, I feel like you're about to get lectured by your parent.
Uh-oh.
Right? It's like, I need to talk to you. Sit down.
I'm listening.
Here you go, Brian. He goes, first of all, I never miss an episode. It really is like listening in on a conversation with some movie/TV nerd friends. Who are you calling a nerd, man?
I'll take it.
Yeah. I know. Whatever works. I'll be honest and say that I've been tempted a few times to skip a commentary episode. How dare you, Ron? Unacceptable. We are an all or nothing show. That's it.
Yeah.
If you like our Star Wars commentaries, you goddamn sure better listen to our She's All That commentary.
Yeah, I was going to say the Phantom or something.
Yeah. Or the Phantom.
Yep.
If you like the Phantom Menace, you're going to listen to the Phantom.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
There you go. Otherwise, you know where the door is. I'm just kidding, Ron. We love you. He says, but then, but he goes on, Brian. See, I have to read ahead. He says, but then I eventually listen anyway, and I'm always glad that I do.
Oh, good.
Yeah, see that? Look at that. That's very nice. Even if I've never seen nor really have any interest in ever seeing the movie that you guys are watching on the track, your conversation is always enlightening and engaging. I won't be tempted again. Well, thank you for that, Ron.
That's the aim, right? That makes me very happy to hear that.
That makes me, I just want to do more She's All That.
Yeah.
I'm not picking on She's All That, but I mean, that was our most out of left field choice, and
I think so.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
He says, secondly, this is specifically for Brian, and I guess for your boy too, Zachy. Given Brian's stated aversion to things that can be dark/bleak in their worldview, Brian mentioned that he's thinking of diving into The Sopranos and giving it a watch, having never seen it before. My advice, space it out as much as you can. Don't binge too much at once. I say this because at the beginning of COVID, when we first got HBO Max, I decided that I would go through a rewatch myself, having not seen it since it aired. Over the course of those 7 or 8 years, I loved this show. Bought the first few seasons on DVD. Any commentary about it being premium television, peak TV, or one of the best television shows ever made, I was all in on. But that's the rub. Over the course of 8 years, with about 10 episodes a year, it doesn't hit you as hard. You can dive in for an hour a week for a couple months a year with these people. However, mistakenly watching the entirety of the series again over the course of a month and a half, by the end, I hated these characters. They were just too much at once. They're gangsters, and they're doing vile, reprehensible gangster shit to one another, to their families, to everyone they come into contact with. They can be funny, but they can also be absolutely disturbing and sociopathic. I know I'm stating the obvious about a show about the mafia. I know. By the end of the last season, during my rewatch, if a mob war had taken every single one of them in all of the families, I would not have complained about seeing that on screen. All of Tony's crew is dead. Oh well, good. Ciao. Arrivederci. So that's my advice. Take breaks as needed between episodes when you watch. It's still a great show, but it's about horrible people.
All right, that makes sense. It's funny. There's
Ryan,
more. There's more.
He added a postscript.
Oh,
He said, now, having listened to your latest episode regarding Venom: The Last Dance, we're now reminded that Brian, even though he's never watched the series itself, has actually seen the final episode already.
yeah.
Well, that's great, because now I can say what I was dancing around in my previous note for fear of spoiling. All of what I wrote above was, in a sense, a rebuttal to David Chase himself, who recently said of the final episode, they wanted to know that Tony was killed. They wanted to see him go face down in Linguini, And I just thought, God, you watched this guy for 7 years, and I know he's a criminal, but don't tell me you don't love him in some way. Don't tell me you're not on his side in some way. And now you want to see him killed? You want justice done? You're a criminal after watching this shit for 7 years. That bothered me, yeah. Ron says, it reinforced to me that the way to consume this series is rather slow, as it was when it aired, because after the Too Fast rewatch that I did, yes, David, Tony's dead ass face down in the Linguini would have been a chef's kiss. Sorry, not sorry. What can I say? I have some feelings about this.
That's really interesting. I'm trying to think if I've really binged a dark show. I mean, like The Wire, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's pretty dark. Yeah, but that's still, it's dark, but it's not like nihilistic, I don't think,
I mean, there's some really, really dark events, but it's not like every single episode.
And you have morally centered characters in it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Well, I was going to say earlier this week, I watched like the last hour of Goodfellas.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like loving it. It's just such a good movie. But then it was over. I didn't go back to it the next night and have to live with these people, ganging up on their families and doing horrible things. So yeah, I can see that. I can envision that, Ron. Like spacing it out, little breathing room. Otherwise, it's just going to feel like just living in darkness every night with people that I might turn on for that reason.
Yeah.
So that's good advice. Right. I appreciate that.
No, that's the type of thing that we can always count on from our listeners.
Yeah.
The proper way to binge watch TV shows.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we got some. Hey, Brian, we have some Star Wars news. So if you don't mind, for old time's sake, can you pipe in the Star Wars music?
Oh yeah.
There we go.
It's been a while.
That's the stuff right there, man. That takes me back to when we used to be excited about Star Wars.
Well, it's like, yeah, all of it was, we didn't have so much of it. So every little crumb became earth-shattering news for us. And then it was something.
That's right.
We would stare at that crumb and look at it from all angles and try to understand what it meant, right?
This is true.
Yeah, yeah. So what do we have today? Do we have crumb or do we have a slice of steak?
No, I don't know. It's so hard to read the tea leaves out of Lucasfilm, but the gist of it is obviously there's a big question mark of what comes next with regards to Star Wars on the big screen. Seems like the small screen side is plugging along, some successful, some less so. We got the Skeleton Crew series is starting in a few weeks.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I think you're excited for that.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot for it, but I just love the concept of it from what I've heard. Sort of like Goonies and Star Wars.
Yeah.
Adventures.
And
like
Jude Law is involved in some capacity.
Yeah. Well, and it feels different. It feels like a different energy in Star Wars skin, and I'm excited to see what that looks like.
And I will say I did not mind the Acolyte, which is a one and done.
Right.
But now that it is a one and done, I would recommend people give it a shot because I think it comes to some sense of closure. The fact that it's not continuing doesn't mean it's not worth watching.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, and we know that Andor's coming back soon-ish, I think.
In spring, I think, right?
Okay. Yeah. Which
honestly, I think out of all the things, that's what I'm most excited for.
Me too.
Boy, did I love Andor.
Yeah, it's good.
That show was really something unique. But regardless, so the next movie coming out is the Mandalorian and Grogu. However, there has been this Rey movie in development, which is going to bring back Daisy Ridley.
Yep. And she's spoken on it. I mean, this is all. She's like, "Yep, I'm doing that."
Right, and so that movie lost its writer recently.
Right.
Stephen S. DeKnight.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think, like, I don't know what the status is of that movie, but then Lucasfilm announced, as it does on occasion, announced a trilogy.
Yes.
Which is going to be written and produced by Simon Kinberg, he of the X-Men, the Fox X-Men films.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as you sent me the note of that with, I think, like a eye roll emoji. In the sense that here's another one that's been announced. Let's see how far this one gets before we get emotionally invested in it.
I was trying to think of what emoji I sent, but yeah, it's sort of like, I mean, we got the Ryan Johnson trilogy, wink, wink. We've got the,
Benioff and Weiss.
Benioff and Weiss. Yeah, it's so.
And you get a trilogy, and you get a trilogy.
Yeah, and then it was sort of muddy, I think, in the announcement, where people, even in Hollywood Reporter, they're like, we're not sure if this is a Rey trilogy or not. Like, Rey supposedly is getting a movie. Maybe that's the standalone thing. Maybe it's this thing. We don't know. It's like the announcement was not very clear.
Right.
And I think it's interesting to announce a trilogy without being able to share what the hook of it is. I mean, so like you had the, oh shoot, my brain, the director of Wonder Woman.
Patty
Jenkins.
God, yes.
Yeah, Patty Jenkins, because she was going to do...
Between the two of us, we have one working brain, so...
Right. Well, it's like, you don't just say she's going to do like a Star Wars film. It's like, oh, it's going to be like Rogue Squadron. It's going to be this sort of like Top Gun. And you're like, oh, that Top Gun in Star Wars. Awesome. And so it was weird where this one was like, trilogy announced. There's also like, maybe this Rey thing. Maybe that's this. We don't know. We're the Hollywood Reporter. Like that was the announcement that I read. So I don't know. I've actually seen articles too that have been saying that, I don't know who's commenting on this, but being like Rey is like the one hand that they have at this moment, besides the TV stuff, Grogu and Mandalorian. So there's a lot riding on what they do with her.
In the sense that Rey is like, see, this is because look, you and I are both Rey fans. We're not, and we like Daisy Ridley, like all of that. I'm on board with. I'm assuming you are too.
Yeah.
Right. But my question is, the Hollywood Reporter piece is basically like Rey is the future of the Star Wars franchise or something to that effect. Right.
Yeah.
And my question is, what are they basing that perception on?
That I have no idea. I mean, I only have my personal feelings, but which are, I think she was cast well. I think Daisy Ridley did a great job. And they created this intriguing new character that we like. Like when she shows up, we like her. We're on her side. We're rooting for her, and I don't know that I felt that way about much of the other characters.
Sure.
I mean,
so
just as
Poe Dameron and
Poe to me just kind of wound up being kind of a nothing burger character who I don't even know if I mean, still
Brian,
could describe him.
I gotta say, he's one hell of a pilot.
Well, that's yes, that's true. I was made aware of that by one of the other characters in the film. But you know what I mean? Like she feels like the strongest, most realized character to come out of the sequels. And so it makes sense to me then, well, if we're going to bet on one of the new characters we've come up with since this Disney acquisition, she's still, got juice in the tank.
Sure.
So like, I couldn't imagine like a Poe trilogy, or something.
I wouldn't want a Poe trilogy, but I wouldn't mind a new trilogy. I almost feel like we need a mulligan insofar as Disney trilogies go.
Yeah, what do you mean?
I think at this point we can accept that, look, the sequel trilogy was not all it could have been. Right. And I don't know if that's a controversial thing. I think we're on the same page there, right?
Yeah. No, I agree.
So I look at it and I'm like, well, at the end of that trilogy, there's nothing there that says you can't continue the saga with these new characters and learn from the lessons of what went wrong with these previous three films and do 10, 11, 12.
Yeah, and I mean there's just so much. Like it will be interesting to see what the story would even be. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, I think this is why people aren't sure about which story this trilogy will be is because with the Rey thing, the movie that was supposedly going to happen, it was about her starting a new Jedi Academy.
Okay, so
Right.
here's what's going to happen. That story is going to get folded into this trilogy. You're not going to have two. That's not going to happen.
As a standalone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it makes the most sense. I mean, yeah, why would you ever be like, oh, we'll just make one of those, see what happens? It's like, no, that's just how they work. They work in threes. But then you have the task of you have to come up with a new galaxy issue and you have to come up with a new villain. They got a daunting task ahead of them. And it's, you know what I mean? This is like a villain that the world has to like suddenly be like, oh yeah, that person can stand side by side with Darth Vader.
I think that the sequel trilogy, hopefully they've learned their lessons, both good and bad, from the sequel trilogy. In that, when again, the stuff that worked, the stuff that audiences didn't particularly respond to, and I don't mean all the like the online incel shit. I mean just like the general audience, what worked, I think doing Empire 2.0, that was not particularly well received. Obviously bringing back Palpatine,
right,
was although who knew such a thing could happen? Who knew that Palpatine could suddenly, when you thought he was defeated?
Yeah.
Who'd thunk? Suddenly JJ is a visionary. By the way, next month is the 5th anniversary of Rise of Skywalker. So if you want to, revisit that one, might be kind of fun to talk through.
I honestly would love to, because it has been a while for me. I'd like to, go back, check that out. That's been a little trippy for me. Been 5 years, because I've said before, there was a theater near my house and it shut down due to COVID, and they never changed the marquee outside. So Star Wars 9 was on the marquee for years. And so for you to say that that's 5 years old is messing with my brain. I feel like, I don't know.
Well, we've had bad luck on this show promising Star Wars commentaries, so I'm like rolling the dice right now.
Yeah, no. We're on this one. I'm on this one. This is gonna be good.
You know what's actually, speaking of the somehow Palpatine return thing? So I showed that meme to my son. A couple of days, with regards to the election. I was like, hey, look, somehow Palpatine returned, and he's like, that movie sucked. Okay. Now he's 17 going on 18 right now, and I remember when that movie came out, he went and watched it multiple times in the theater.
Okay.
Right. So to me, this is sort of the congealing of the consensus as I remember being that age and everybody else says something sucks and you're like, oh, I guess it sucks.
That thing sucks. Yes. The stamp. It has been stamped.
It has been stamped.
Yeah.
So I look at that, and I'm not saying he doesn't feel that way. I'm saying I'm curious where he's at, 10 years from now with regards to the sequel trilogy.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. But there is sort of this consensus forming around those films. And again, at the very least, you say, well, they weren't all that they could have been.
I do agree with that. Yeah.
I think that's something most people would agree on. To which degree on that spectrum is up for conversation, but I think most people land somewhere there. And so I say, well, you've got pieces in play that work. You've got a universe that is beloved, and you have an opportunity now that you've gotten the nostalgia out of your system. Now take it forward.
I mean, that's what I say. George Lucas himself has said, some of the storytelling is poetry. It rhymes, right? So yeah. I'm all about that, of course. But I think we have been pushed to our limits a little bit with the rhyming in the sequels. Yes. And so I want to see 3 movies that do not resemble the others, story-wise. Right. Like, they don't repeat the beats. They don't, there's no dark cave in the second one. Like, let's do something completely different. Start the Jedi Academy, whatever. Like, I'm into it. I want to be into this, but I don't want to go in feeling like, oh, right, we're just rhyming again.
Right. So. I think the rhyme was very clearly a mistake, but there's an opportunity, like you're saying, oh, what's a new villain or whatever. And I agree with that, but I'm also like, just do something bonkers. You've done Stormtroopers again. You've done okay. That's all. It's out of your system.
Yeah.
What comes next? And use the books, all those Legends books that are now non-canon. I'm sure there's stuff in there that was effective. Dip into that stuff,
Totally. Or I'm just off the top of my head, I'm reminded, I'm thinking if it's a bunch of Jedi, obviously you're going to have some sort of Sith or Dark Jedi or something. And I'm remembering how different and exciting and promising Darth Maul felt in 19. You're like,
yeah.
what is that?
Yeah.
He looks so different and he's so mysterious and he doesn't talk much, but he's the best, handler of a lightsaber I've ever seen. Like, it just felt so different instead of like a Darth Vader 2.0 or a Darth Vader acolyte or something,
Yeah.
So I would love to see something like that.
Yeah. And the one thing that I've seen with regards to, and I haven't kept up with all of the television stuff, but broadly, I like how the TV shows oftentimes are sort of proof of concept in terms of what you can do within the universe. Again, I appreciate, I wasn't in love with the Acolyte, but I did appreciate a lot of it. And I appreciated one big thing was like, it's something different. We've never seen this era before.
Sure.
Something totally new. I want more of that. And I'm like, maybe there is like there is some kind of a limitation with, if you're doing a movie, it has to have a movie scale. But in a way, that's good. Okay, so think it through. What's a threat that has the scope for a movie? But what are the things we've learned from the shows in terms of character construction? I think all of that applies. I am a little bit at wit's end when it comes to how many false starts it appears Lucasfilm is having.
Yeah. I maybe they're feeling compelled when they have something that's looking like it's 85% there.
Yeah.
They want to come out with good news.
Right.
Or something. But it's hard to feel completely like this is a guarantee just based on past announcements. But
I mean, it's become a joke at this point. Like, the fastest way to ensure your Star Wars project doesn't happen is by it being announced.
Yeah. But
remember,
I will say that
Waititi was going to do one. Kevin Feige was going to do one. Remember?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Damon Lindelof.
Yeah. All that stuff,
Yeah.
Lindelof was going to do the Rey movie.
Yeah. But I think this is gonna happen. A Rey movie is going to happen.
Sure.
But frankly, I'm glad that they're not like, well, let's just get it started and we'll. So, I mean, for better or worse, I mean, Marvel does have a fairly good track record, but they seem to be people who like improvise with millions of dollars to work with, and then if they have a cut and it's not working, they're like, well, we'll just reshoot half of it, and they just keep throwing money at it until they have a finished product. Like, I'm glad that it seems they're not doing that with Star Wars. Like, well, let's just get going because we have a date. It seems like, all right, well, if this isn't gelling with this writer or, they're not feeling this, we're not feeling that, let's keep going. Let's go till we find it. That sounds good to me.
That's the way to do it.
Let's go till we find it.
Yeah. What a concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, something to think about. It's weird in hindsight, but there's only 10 years between Revenge of the Sith and The Force Awakens.
That is weird.
Like, it feels like longer, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. So we're halfway after the last movie came out already, like that 10 years.
Wow. Yeah.
So, the time passes, and I think, honestly, and you and I, we've discussed this on the show, I think there is an appetite now for Star Wars on the big screen.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question now is, how best do you direct that appetite in a way that allows for a willingness to, the willingness that the audience had after Force Awakens, after Rogue One, for anything, which quickly kind of tapered off. How do you bottle that and make sure that it stays in place?
Yeah. Well, time helps, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think you're right. So that to be continued. Maybe we will hear that music again, Brian.
I hope so. I just, honestly, just thinking about the promise of something new and exciting. I mean, yeah, I'm up on it now. Like, versus when I sent you that link and I was like, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm always gonna, if they let us down over and over, yeah, I'm gonna get frustrated. But I'm always hopeful.
Yeah.
that they can strike gold again.
I agree. Hey, let's talk about the main event for this week.
All right, we got. Hey, this is a double feature this week.
It's a twofer.
Yeah.
So, well, first up, we got the new Robert Zemeckis joint is in theaters right now.
Yeah, yes, it is.
It is playing to packed theaters, and by packed, I mean the opposite of packed. Empty theaters is what I meant.
I literally saw this by myself. I mean, and when I say that, I don't mean I went over there alone. I mean, I was the only soul in the theater watching this movie.
That is hilarious because I went with Amina and there was about 4 other people in the theater with us. So I was like, man, this theater's empty. But then you told me that yours was. I was like, oh well, then we were like a 1920s speakeasy compared to your theater.
Yeah.
Which is appropriate because at least part of this movie is set in the 1920s.
That's true. There is jitterbugging or whatever.
There's quite a lot of jitterbuggery to be had. Yeah.
Yes.
Now I should say I had a sense that reviews, were kind of mixed, but I didn't look at the reviews, and then I watched the movie, and then I came home and I was like, well, let's see what Rotten Tomatoes says, and it was at like 37% or something like that, and I was like, WTF?
Okay,
I don't get it.
let's just say up top, because I'm going to circle right back to where you are right now. So for people who may not be familiar, that could be possible, right? Because this movie did not have a lot of fanfare. But basically, what this movie is the camera is fixed on a portion of Earth, and it never moves.
That's right.
Literally, the camera does not tilt up, down, pan, right, left. It is.
You have
fixed.
one frame for the entirety of the movie.
For the entirety of the movie, and it starts with the dinosaurs, and we're watching the meteor hit and the ice age, and then we see a Native American couple falling in love and getting married, and then we're seeing a house being built, and we see Benjamin Franklin being carted by, but the camera never moves. Like, they just pass through the frame that we're seeing. And then, Tom Hanks's family basically moves in, and that's the majority of the stories with that family. And we're just seeing life, all the life that has taken place in this space. That's what this is. And I have to admit, when I saw the trailer, you and I are Zemeckis heads, right?
Yep.
I mean, like he's made some of our favorite films of all time. He's also had an era where he just hasn't hit as hard, and it's hard for us, and we want him to recapture that magic. And when I saw this trailer, I got a little nervous. I loved the high concept aspect of it, but I was worried it was going to be kind of like an elevated Hallmark movie.
Sure. Yeah.
And it seems immediately, I feel like that was the reaction I was seeing online.
Interesting.
Right? Just people like, oh, this looks so cloying.
This is a reaction to the trailers.
To the trailers, yeah. Oh. And then the reviews come out, and like you said, 30-some% on Rotten Tomatoes. I went and saw the movie, had my feelings on it. I'll just say I liked it.
Yeah.
Then you were seeing it that night, and I was nervous. And your response, which you were just about to get to, I was so relieved. You liked it.
I texted Brian. I was like, dude, that was very special.
I think that is the perfect word for it. Yeah. And so tell me why you say special.
I just, it's such a unique approach, and there is sort of a film school experiment aspect to it, but it wouldn't work if not for the fact that everything that passes through the frame is so fascinating. And this is a movie that it's like we're jumping back and forth in time, and it's not just a simple matter of cut. It's like you see the past and the future sort of intrude on the frame as we're watching. So it'll be like, it's hard to explain. It's hard to vocalize what is such a purely visual experience, right?
Sure.
But it's like, you have the characters in the frame, and they'll make a reference to something, and then you see within that frame, another kind of window pops up where you have a character from the past is doing something, and then that fills up the screen, and we see that play out. And it's all these, like, it's these thematic threads that are connected to each other across the expanse of time.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, yeah, as you said, it's the story of this family. You know, you have the father, who's played by Paul Bettany, from before. You know, he and his wife, who's played by Kelly Riley. You know, they move in when she's expecting. She's expecting the Tom Hanks character. We watch him grow up. And through the digital, you know, the de-aging, we see Tom Hanks as a teenager, and he meets Robin Wright, and et cetera. And it takes you from basically, you know, whenever that happens, which is post World War II, up to like right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it made me conscious of sort of the way life, it just goes by so fast,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it really made me sit with that. And I think if a movie can do that, if it can make you feel the fragility of it and the preciousness of it in a way that's really meaningful, then it's doing something right. And I have not dipped into the reviews. I don't know if the critique lies around the storyline or the aesthetic choices, but I'm kind of like, to me at least, this is a perfect marriage of aesthetic and story.
Yeah.
And the performances are fascinating. And obviously it's Robin Wright and Tom Hanks, who we adore. We love them.
Mm-hmm.
So we love seeing them go through this story. And it's just, they are such consummate craftsmen
Mm-hmm.
that it works perfectly seamlessly. And I should say, by the way, the deep fake technology, I've never seen it look better than in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've seen a lot of people not be able to buy into it
Uh-huh.
because we are so familiar with what Tom Hanks looks like now.
Right.
And so their brains just won't accept a digital teenage sort of Tom Hanks thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I mean, I remember in The Irishman, it was difficult to buy because you were seeing like a 35-year-old Robert De Niro move like a 75-year-old Robert De Niro.
Right.
Like
right.
it didn't. But in this, I look for what it is. Is it ever going to look perfect? No. But I feel like I was with the movie.
Yeah.
And I thought they made the right choices, at least with the bodies and not trying to put someone's head on someone else's body and make it like completely something your
Yeah.
brain won't accept. I just feel
Mhm.
like they did the right amount of touches for me to go, okay, yeah, he's acting like a 22-year-old here. Fine. You know, and then now he's
Yeah.
acting like a 35-year-old. Now he's acting like a 50, you know?
Mhm. I
Yeah.
agree.
All to say it worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I, I'm, I went to the movie with Amina, and we had the baby with us. Okay. And he's 4 months old, and I'm at this stage of my life where I have an almost 18-year-old and I've got a 4-month-old. So I'm like acutely aware of how just the time warping effect of getting older.
Yeah.
And I don't say that in a self-pitying way, but I mean, that's life. That's what it is. And so certainly this movie, it just spoke to me at this moment in a way few films have.
I totally understand that. I mean, there are like two concepts I think about a lot, and people who are around me often, have to hear about this a lot. But I mean, I remember being profoundly affected by that chapter in the Watchmen comic, the story of Dr. Manhattan.
Yep. As I knew that's where you're going with this.
Yep. When I read that, it was so profound to me that I put it down because I wanted to sit in it. I didn't want to keep going. I wanted to sit in it for a while. And basically it's, this character, radiation, whatever. And then he experiences all time at once.
Right.
And so as he's telling his story, he's telling it out of order because it may as well be the future of the past. It's all happening to him at once. So the way he's talking about, meeting his wife, he's like, it's always the present tense. I'm in a bar. This woman buys me a beer. A woman's never bought me a beer before. And then he'll be like, we're having a massive argument. Like he's jumped into the future. Like it's all, we're not
it's
together
all happening
anymore.
right now.
It's all happening right now. And the way that I thought about that then is, like being in a space. It's just, I think about the ghosts in all the space that I'm in, not the literal ghosts, but like who lived in this place before and had the best day of their life? who lived here before and had the worst day of their life. And
Yeah.
like, as I'm having the worst day of my life in here, or I'm having the best day of my life, it's just, I love thinking that all this stuff it all happened and it all mattered in its moment. And it's kind of cool to think of all the things that happen in the spaces that we occupy,
That's right.
all the people that occupied that space. And similarly, I had a moment where I was on the freeway driving home from work one day, and this car, and I was stuck in traffic, literally just sitting there. And there's a car next to me playing a song super, super loud. And I remember I wasn't annoyed. I was just kind of like, huh, like it just drew my attention. And I thought, in 100 years, no one will know that song. Like, I barely know. I mean, with some exception, but I mean, 100 or 120 years ago, we probably don't know any of the songs that everybody was whistling.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then I thought, this is our time. Like, the person next to me blasting this song, and weirdly, I thought of like the Kardashians and how much people get so triggered by them and everything. But it's like, that happens to be a thing that we all understand and have an opinion on in our time, right? And in 100 years, it'll be their time. And 100 years before us, it was their time. And I can't relate to the things they were going through, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think about this stuff a lot, right? Honestly. And this movie is that. That's what this movie is.
Yeah.
Like, there's a moment, and I don't think this is necessarily a spoiler to say, but there's a moment I thought was so cool where you see this Native American couple, and this guy is in love with this woman, and he gives her this necklace that he's made, right?
Yeah.
And it's really lovely. And you think, wow, that happened in this space that these people later operating vacuum cleaners have no idea. In that very square space, these people fell in love and exchanged a gift. And then later there's a conservationist that comes to visit Hanks's family and is like, I think there might be like artifacts and things that could be valuable to be found in your backyard. And then they find that necklace.
Right.
And you just think about, when like finding an arrowhead in a field and you're like, oh, wow, cool. But it's like, no, but who
There's
shot
a story.
that arrow? Yeah. Who crafted that arrow? Like, you shared that space together. Like you touch in a weird sort of way across time. And I just, that's what this movie hits upon. And I could see that just not landing for some people. Right. And I think the biggest barrier, I think, for most people with this movie is going to be the theatricality of it. I think because it's a movie where the camera doesn't move, the blocking needs to be dynamic. It needs to hold your attention. So occasionally characters will walk right up and put their face into camera and be like, wow, I never thought of it that way, kind of a thing. But it's like, and you might be like, okay, it feels a little big, or it feels a little hokey or something. But I think you just have to do that. Otherwise you'd be like looking at a window box, basically. Yeah. There has to be a theatricality to it by virtue of the static nature of it, right? Yeah. Sort of like with a play. And I could see that.
I mean, it is like watching a play.
It is like watching a play, and the way that they talk can be a little big at times. But again, you're jumping through time, and moments need to land with an impact, right? Even sometimes it is really a series of sketches, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, I do feel like they connect, and I had emotional reactions to them.
Yeah, but, I think the way the each vignette, again, like I said, it thematically connects to the next thing. And sometimes we go to the past, sometimes we go to the future, and yet it all ties together. I think there's one shot that I absolutely loved, where it's, in the entire film we only see, it's like having a camera placed pointing towards one angle, right? And so we never see what's on the other side of the camera.
Yeah,
except for one time where you have characters who are pulling, a Chester with like a mirror on it. And they put and suddenly we see, because of the mirror, we see the other side of the room.
Yep.
But what we see is characters from one of the other eras having a conversation. So it's like the mirror is in 2020, but the conversation that we're seeing reflected in the mirror is in 1980 or whatever.
Right.
And I'm like, man, it's clever.
Yeah. I mean, so this is what I'm trying to say. Like, I think in the past, I know I've tried to be charitable to Zemeckis a little bit, like with Flight. I think Flight is totally fine. I think it's well done fine.
Which also had Kelly Riley, now that I think about it.
Yeah, she's become part of his repertory.
Yeah.
But I knew I was trying to, like, it had strong moments, but as a whole, I don't know that it felt like something super strong.
Sure.
And I could acknowledge that. But this, I really do feel like it's experimental. I do, like I said, I think the tone, some people may be put off by it. Like, it may be a little too saccharine. Like, that's very possible. But I think what he set out to do and the execution and all this came together for something that felt very, like you said, special, and something that I think only Zemeckis could do. This played into his strengths in a way that made me encouraged. I like seeing the experimental nature and the heart that he's always, trying to inject in everything. And just what I thought felt like a really, even as theatrical as it could be, like an authentic look at just what life is like. Mm-hmm. Like, life sometimes is very joyful. I mean, it all came together in something that really worked for me. And it made me really happy that it worked for you.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I first of all, you and I are on the exact same wavelength for this movie.
Yeah.
And it is sad to me that people are not checking it out, but I feel like this is a movie that's going to be discovered. I truly believe that.
Yeah. 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 You're sorry. No, I don't want to interrupt your thought.
Well, just to pick up on the point you were making. Yeah. I mean, there's that run, like Beowulf and Marwen and all this stuff where, you're kind of like, oh, come on, Bob. Like,
yeah.
This is not one of those. I think it's a legitimately very, very good movie.
Yeah, I agree. And what I was going to say was, earlier I alluded to Pretty Woman. Would that very same movie that is beloved, that is a classic, would it be as beloved if it was to come out today? Or would audiences be like, well, that was corny?
Right.
I almost do feel like this movie might even feel a little out of time, or like Forrest Gump in a way, where Forrest Gump is 100% earnest.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you put that movie out now, as beloved as it is by most, it would be eviscerated. Right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so I do feel like this movie is pretty damn earnest for this point in time. So if someone did see it and said, Brian, I tried, and I couldn't get past the de-aging stuff. I couldn't get past the saccharine nature over the whatever. I'd be like, I get it. I understand.
Yeah.
Like, I do almost wonder if this is a movie slightly out of time, but that doesn't mean that it's not good.
Yeah. So, I think to that point, I think that's what makes it timeless. I think that will allow it to withstand the test of time.
Yeah.
Because I think the thematic territory that it lives within, it's something, it's universal,
Mm-hmm.
There's like real moments of poignancy, it's the way it tells the story. It's sort of like we're skipping a stone over a pond.
Mm-hmm.
And each time it connects with the water, we sort of touch in and see what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
So how things have changed from this portion to this portion. Oh, that person is gone now. Oh, this person is older. Oh, the daughter's, and I don't know, that stuff hits you, because that's life, man,
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, to go back to that, what I was saying, and to touch on what you're saying now, like, and again, I don't want to spoil things, but like, there's a moment with Paul Bettany's character where he has, like an issue, right? And then he has kind of a catharsis with that issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see the way that, again, it's executed like a play because the camera is back.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to move. And in a movie, when he has that moment, you'd probably do a close-up.
That's right.
You'd see something in his eyes shift,
mm-hmm. Yeah,
and realize without words, like, oh, he's having, and then, you would really be in his head with him, and then you'd probably do a close-up of the thing that he does, and it would be artfully done in a certain sort of way, right? So you would have a certain sort of feeling about what's happening. In this, I could see someone arguing that it comes across a little staged or theatrical or big.
Right. Yeah.
Or obvious or on the nose. And it's like, well, maybe, but that is what has to happen in this conceit. And so it's like, if you are bought into that character, if you're bought into this family, then hopefully it doesn't matter.
Right.
So I think for me, I was happy to see what happened because I cared.
Right.
Right. But I could see someone being like, well, it just felt too on the nose. And I'd be like, well, then I can't argue with you like that. But that's the virtue of the execution of this movie. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway.
Well,
I hope that makes sense. I realize this is a little vague for people who haven't watched it, but
no, but I think it's the right amount of vagary because I think this is a movie that's just sort of best experienced, you know?
yeah, I mean, I went in kind of knowing the general reception to it, at least critically. And so you writing me and be like saying that was very special. Oh, I was so happy. So happy. I didn't feel so alone.
Yeah, I honestly, because I didn't fully know the critical thing. So to see the Rotten Tomatoes score, I didn't go in and read the reviews, but to see the score, I was like, something's amiss here. And I wonder if a lot of it is. I suspect many of those reviews are probably mixed to negative, and those are just getting lumped in, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sorry, it's not a bad movie.
I agree.
It is not rotten. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I if it was more in the like 50s or something or 60 or something, I could understand that because I don't know this is going to play for everybody.
Right.
But I think for people who are willing to jump on the experiment, I think it is well executed.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Yeah. Well, hey, there's another movie that's out right now, Brian. I wonder what we're doing like a counterculture this week.
I was going to say I didn't expect to be so on the defense this week, but
So Red 1 is in theaters as we record this.
uh-huh.
This is the new Dwayne Johnson joint directed by Jake Kasdan, starring J.K. Simmons as Santa Claus, aka Red 1.
Yeah.
And Chris Evans is playing Chris Evans circa 2005, I'm going to say.
Right.
So this one, famously, Brian, I think you saw this trailer. You're like, I hate this trailer. This is like AI generated this movie.
Absolutely. Yep.
And let me just say, the trailers did not do this movie any favors.
I hated this trailer. It felt so like what you see dumped onto a streamer. That feels like sort of a half-heartedly executed idea that's just sort of like, oh, this is kind of the humor now, right? People like the self-mocking thing. So let's have something crazy and expensive happen because we have the budget. And then let's have a character go, did that just happen? You know, like that kind of humor. And like, yeah, it looked so bland. And like you said, yeah, AI generated. I felt like if this is where we're headed, we're doomed.
So I was visiting you last week, and we were both like, well, we're going to watch Red 1 for the show. Like, we both, we map out, peek behind the curtain, we map out our episodes. We know what stuff we want to talk about. And I was like, well, this kind of worked out, to be honest, because you and I were going to watch Here.
Yes.
And then we were both like, well, we could go watch that, or we could just sit on the couch and not do anything.
Yes.
And we landed on that. But I was like, well, I saw that there was like preview screenings of Red 1, that day that I was visiting. And I was like, why don't, we got to watch this anyway. We might as well, Thelma and Louise this shit and just do it together.
Exactly.
Right. And so that certainly, I know your state of mind. That was my state of mind walking in. I'm like, well, I guess let's just do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so let me just say that. So spoiler alert. Halfway through, I think you and I both, we kind of leaned in like, I think I'm liking this.
Yes. There was a point where there's kind of like a twist in the middle, and then we see what the villain's plan is. And I leaned over to you. I was like, I think this is like kind of clever.
It was like afraid to say whether we like it or not,
Yeah, actually, I had no idea what you were feeling, and I was a little nervous to show my hand.
I have to say, honestly, I was on board within 5 minutes.
I'm not sure about 5 minutes for me, but we both agreed when Act 1 was over. I was like, oh, this is not the movie I expected.
Yeah, the one thing I found it clever, the idea that Santa is like the president,
Yeah.
and there's this whole apparatus that's around him to protect him. But what I like is that it didn't do that in a satirical way. It wasn't like Elf or something.
Totally.
It played it straight. And it's kind of this wonky premise, but it had the conviction to be totally on point with that. And so you have this scene where Santa, played by J.K. Simmons, he's at a mall. Because why? Sometimes he likes to just show up at a mall and just see what folks are up to, right?
Mhm.
And he likes to be, the mall Santa. And you've got Dwayne Johnson standing behind him and just totally doing the Secret Service agent thing, and he's just scoping it out. I'm like, that's really clever. That was my thought.
Mhm.
But then we have a scene shortly after that where basically the bit is Dwayne Johnson's character Cal. He's going to retire.
Yeah.
He's been Secret Service agent or ELF, whatever, I forget what it stands
I
for,
don't remember.
for however long. And I was like, oh, they has this relationship. It's like Gerard Butler and Aaron Eckhart in those Has Fallen movies,
Yeah.
And honestly, I found it very, very effective where he wants to retire. Why? Because for the first time, there's more people on the naughty list than on the nice list.
And it's funny because even as you say that, I can see some people being like, "What?"
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
it's what I really liked about it is it's like they're going through this mall and they're seeing people be jerks.
That's right.
And it's not just like, oh, they steal or they do, like kind of corny things. It's like, no, people just aren't nice.
That's right.
And it's, it resembles your mall, bumping into someone and then someone not saying excuse me, but just being mad at you,
Right.
that kind of thing. And just to add to the whole thing, I mean, what I was expecting, I haven't liked Dwayne Johnson's performances in a while.
Right.
I remember Skyscraper being kind of my tipping point where I was like,
that's right.
Yeah, I like woke up to it. I was like, oh, he's just doing the same thing over and over. And he always plays this Boy Scout with a smirk. And in this, I was expecting that. Oh, he's got a smirk and he's like the greatest guy at everything. And he never falls down and he never, but in this, he plays it straight like the whole way.
Yeah.
So in that moment,
yeah, exactly.
when he's like, I don't really, there's too many people in the '90s. People aren't nice anymore. I don't think I can do this. There's no joy in this. It's played completely straight, and that's what surprised me.
Yes, that's what I liked about that. That's what I liked about the approach, because I think if you smirk at it, you sort of, the whole edifice sort of falls down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the movie kind of creates its own mythology, and this whole kind of parallel reality where all these fantasy people and whatnot all exist, and I found all of that really interesting, and that was kind of my thing. I was like, if you poke holes in this and make fun of it, then the audience is going to buy what I think is a very good message, which is just about the importance of showing kindness,
Mm-hmm.
and in that sense, the way they wove in the Chris Evans character, who, as a kid, he had some, he experienced a loss in his own life, and that affected who he became as an adult, and all of that stuff. These are tropes. It's a very tropey story.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever I watch a movie like this, I try to place myself in the eyes of an audience that's seeing it for the first time, which it would be like kids,
Sure.
And I'm like, I think the message here is a very good one. I think kids we don't celebrate Christmas in my family, but I want to take my kids to see this because I think there's a lot. There's an undercurrent of decency underlying it, which I think is it's rare, and it's nice.
Yeah, I agree with that. And maybe that's it too. Like, I think it aligns with our values in a lot of ways, where it seems like, in this climate, as we were talking about earlier, it's like a lot of people are feeling, you're this or you're that. And if you're not this, I don't like that, and not just in terms of issues or things, but just people, and people just, I don't know, dismissing people and not trying to see them as complicated creatures. And I think that's what I really related to in this movie, where Dwayne Johnson's character is having a hard time doing that. He's only seeing the darkness in people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's the journey to realizing that people are complicated. Why are they that way? there's like this whole sort of conceit with Santa, like he sees the child in everyone. Yes, the adult may be like this, but at one point they were a child, and they were nice and they were optimistic and whatever. And it's unfortunate when they go a certain way, but you don't want to lose sight of the fact that there's a child inside in there somewhere, and you want to get that child back out.
Yeah.
And I found that I can't believe I'm saying I found it beautiful. It was beautiful.
And to the point about Santa, J.K. Simmons is terrific in this.
He is. Yeah. I think there was this sort of, I'm gonna have a real hard time articulating this, but there was like a moment in humor. I mean, going back to a reluctance to be earnest. Everything had to be like satirical or mocking or sarcastic. And I think that's what the trailer led me to feel like this movie was going to be.
You were expecting that happened.
Yeah, certainly that. And just the whole, even the conceit of Santa being like this he's ripped, and his reindeer look like, freaking fierce monsters, and the Rock, watch out for him. Like he's going to do like triple whatever flips off of buildings and land, and and isn't that funny? Because that elves aren't like that, but they are in our movie. I thought it was going to be like that, and it's not. It's not that. It actually does set up this kind of fun, unique mythology, like you said. I mean, I guess I don't want to ruin any surprises, but there, like you said, there are other fantasy characters that show up in this movie that I was like, whoa, cool. And it, like you said, it wasn't, that happened. You just saw that, like that would be the thing that I feel like 5 years ago, something, and you expect that to be funny. And I so admired the movie for not doing that.
It gave, as a two-hander, I thought it worked well because I think Chris Evans and The Rock play off each other pretty well. They each occupy their own lanes. But this is a conversation you and I had. One thing that I really liked, and without getting into too many details, it feels like the first time a movie has found a way to make to give the impression that The Rock is outmatched.
Yes, yeah, you pointed that out, yeah,
and mined humor from it in a way that's endearing, right? Because for those of you who don't know, in the Fast movies and whatever, he's had it like in his contract. No, nobody can beat me, and if somebody punches me, I have to punch them or whatever. And I'm like, no, people love Indiana Jones because he's constantly getting his ass kicked.
Yeah, or when he leaps, he doesn't leap far enough.
Yeah. That's what makes those characters endearing. And certainly, there's one moment in this which cracked me up. And I was like, finally, The Rock is doing that thing that he should have been doing a long time ago. Absolutely.
And it turned out to be a real character moment.
Yep.
For the two of them. Right? So it's obviously, I mean, it's not a spoiler to say, like, they begin at odds. And of course, they find their way into becoming sort of like buddies and like a buddy cop situation where it's like their strengths work well together. And I found it satisfying. I found it satisfying 100%. To watch. So, and I also do want to say, I mean, look, is this like, I don't want people to have the impression that we think this is some sort of like new classic in the making. I don't know about that.
It is not The Magnificent Ambersons.
It is not The Magnificent Ambersons. And like, but I think I am just totally surprised because I had a very different impression of this from the trailer. I went in kind of annoyed.
Sure.
And it was to my surprise that I actually thought it was a very fun, sweet, I thought clever fantasy film. And the way that it plays even with Santa or Christmas sort of ideas, like the naughty list. The naughty list becomes like a big component of the villain's plan and what that person intends to do with the people on the naughty list and their motivations for that even. What it is they want out of what they're trying to do with the naughty list. I was like, that's kind of clever and weirdly sort of understandable, but obviously not the right thing to do. And I don't know. So a lot of this is coming from me being completely shocked that I actually had a good time.
Here's what I would say. In terms of tone and general effect, I put it in the same box as the two recent Jumanji films.
I think that's totally.
I would say if you've liked the Jumanji movies that star The Rock and that Jake Kasdan directed, you like this movie that stars The Rock and that Jake Kasdan directed. Very, very similar. And I think I enjoyed both of those, and I enjoyed this in that same vein.
I think that's perfect. Yep.
Yeah.
I think that you're right. That's like the same box.
Yeah. Well, cool, man.
Yeah. Who knew?
Who'd have thunk? We're swimming against the tide this week.
Dude, it's you and I against the world this weekend because dude, people are coming down on this movie. I mean, this one's also in the 30s on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, is it really? See, I didn't even know that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like it's in the 30s, which I was like, wow. And I was on Reddit just sort of out of curiosity under the movies subreddit, just seeing what people were saying. And a lot of it was just dunking on it. And then there was like somewhere in the middle, like, I don't know. I was actually kind of better than I expected. I was like, yes. And I like going down that thread and people being like, I mean, is it a new classic? I don't know. But, it was a little more, it was more fun than I expected. And I was like, okay, yeah. Like
it is absolutely watchable. Don't listen to the hate.
Yeah.
I gotta be honest. I suspect this one will find its audience. If not now, then eventually.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
This seems like one of those things that, people find on streaming or on, when it's shown on TBS and Saturday afternoon, and it becomes kind of a beloved artifact.
Yeah. And I think with no pressure on it, I mean, like right now it's out, it's new. Is it worth going to see? Is it worth, good Lord, I paid what, like $27 for that ticket?
It was a lot.
That should be a crime, frankly. I mean, it was like, this is AMC Dolby special theater, whatever. But anyway, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of pressure on it. And it's, I think with like you said, when people find it and they discover it and they're surprised to see certain elements to it, and then by the end, get swept up in the budding buddiness of them and where it lands, I think people are going to go, oh, well, why were people so hard on that?
Yeah. That's right, Brian. We are right. I am content in that the factualness of our rightness.
Cut to our listener letters next week. You made me spend $27.
Hey, I'm very curious. I will say I posted on social media like, oh yeah, I really liked it, and people are like, this is a joke, right? Like people, So yeah. Let's see. Hey, if you watch it, let us know. Let us know your thoughts. You can let us know your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree. You can email us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast, and message us there. We also have a Patreon, Brian.
That's right. We have a Patreon now where you can sign up for $5 a month over at patreon.com/moviefilmpodcast, where you'll find every commentary we've ever done. Without ads.
More than 100 commentaries.
Over 100 commentaries. Wow. And you will find every episode and commentary moving forward absolutely ad-free. So we've said it. I won't say it every time, but just because it's a little fresh. I mean, there's been a little bit of changes with the advertising with our show. And so there are a lot more ads and a lot more ad breaks. And that is something that we are not able to control ourselves. So we thought we would create this option where sign up for $5 a month. You can get the show ad-free in its purest form, all the commentaries ad-free, and enjoy it the way we hope you would. So you can do that at patreon.com/moviefilmpodcast.
Absolutely. And as always, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review, leave a star rating. We've gotten some new reviews lately, which I'm going to read in upcoming episodes. Also, if you're looking for me online, you can find me on social media. Brian, I have left Twitter behind.
So, okay. I've heard about this. I've heard about a little bit of an exodus there. So you have done that as well.
So I have not deleted my account. It still exists, mainly because I don't want somebody taking my name,
Mm-hmm.
But I had kind of just hung in there, and I was like, well, let's see what happens with the election. That was really my thought process.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And once Elon used his evil power for evil,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I was like, you know what? I'm good. So I've pulled up stakes. I'm at Blue Sky. That's kind of my primary hangout, but you can also find me on Threads and of course Instagram, etc. And if you're looking for my writing, you can find me at the San Francisco Chronicle, where I've got some fun stuff coming up. Also at the Wrap and IGN. Some new features coming this month at both of those places. What about you, Brian?
Well, as always, you can find episodes I've written for Puppy Dog Pals at Disney Plus to stream, and episodes of Young Jedi Adventures airing on Disney Junior and streaming on Disney Plus.
There you go. And we'll be back soon with our next regular show. Also, I guess we can say this, right, Brian? Our next commentary track?
Yeah. We can. Yeah, absolutely. It's timely.
I will say, once we finish recording and we put it out in the world, the only question I will have is, are you not entertained?
The next episode we do will echo through eternity.
One hopes. Or if no one's around, maybe we're in Elysium and we're already dead.
Oh, wow.
So could go either way.
Yeah.
We'll find out. But that's coming up. You guys can connect the dots, what we're talking about. Either way, we'll be back here soon with the next commentary on our next regular show. This has been Movie Film 304. Goodbye.
Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Movie Film Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and